All right, Cameron Wurf, goodness gracious, it is great to see you. It's been way too long. I want to kick things off by recalling how we first met. And my recollection goes something like this. I want to set the scene. It's the year is about 2007. I'm in my second year of U.S. American domestic pro racing. North American racing it's in its heyday, and Tour of Georgia is it. It's before Tour of Colorado, before Tour of California, before these all the other big races. Tour of Georgia is the race that draws Lance Armstrong. A bunch of Europeans will come over and use it as like a spring training campaign. So on and so forth. Our team, Priority Health, gets the nod, and we're going to be in the race. And we're a very low-level team, and it's hard fought to get your spot on that roster. And we get this notification that this former Olympic rower is going to be on the team, this Australian named Cam Wurf, who doesn't have much of a cycling history. He comes over, the race goes perfectly well, nothing extraordinary, and at the end of the race, you basically say to me in your amazing Australian positivity, you're like, well, mate, see you in the Pro Tour. And I just think that is the craziest thing I can ever think of. I'm like a fledgling domestic pro. How am I ever going to make it to the Pro Tour? Fast forward 3 years, and there we are racing the Giro together. So, long-winded intro here. What is your recollection of that Tour of Georgia?
Yeah, what's funny is how I never really thought about how the team would get that information now. I mean, to me, it was sort of a whirlwind. I hadn't intended to change sports. I had tendonitis in my wrist. I went to the Nationals that year because I'd just been training on my bike because I couldn't row at that point for a few months. Did quite well. The National Federation had said, look, if you're interested in changing sports, we'll support you to do that, yada, yada, yada. And then it was through Glenn Mitchell, being a Kiwi, I guess, and a bit of a connection to Australia. And I guess you had some Tasmanians, remember the Sullivans and Carl Menzies was at Health Net there. Caleb Mannion, Jelly Belly. I mean, there's quite a few Tasmanians over there. I guess just sort of somehow Glenn Mitchell just got in touch with me and just said, listen, are you interested in doing some racing? And I said, absolutely. And we'd planned just that. I'd never done a stage race in my life. So it was, how about we do an NRC, was it? NRC race?
National Race Calendar.
There, like Redlands or something. I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds great. I could look it up online and I'd followed the guys. And then next year, a week before Georgia, it was like he rings and he says, listen, how about we just throw you in the deep end? I said, well, hey, I don't know what to expect because I've never done one before. So, yeah, I'd probably prefer to be surrounded by really good riders for my first race. That was my thought.
Really from safety.
Yeah, well, I remember from rowing, when you got thrown in a good crew, it was so much easier to row well. So my concept with cycling was, well, the higher level I can race at quickly, I'll learn quicker.
Sure.
And that was really my logic. I never had any comprehension of the struggles, like you telling me about your Cat 1. Or remember the guys asked me, how'd you get your Cat 1? I was like, Cat 1? What do you mean? I've never had one. This is the first ever cycling license. and it's letting me race here. What's a Cat 1?
Oh, my God.
So it was very naive. But, yeah, I mean, that was great. I mean, that was a great way to do it because you just found out straight away what the level was. It was either sink or swim.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like 23, and I thought that was old to try to change sports, which it was. And then here I am, fast forward all these years later, at whatever I was, 36, went back into the World Tour after a 6-7 year hiatus. So, yeah. I
mean, yeah, exactly. You like to look at your professional cycling timeline is enough to make your head spin.
I think it was your brother.
Yeah.
It was your brother the reason I was there. Wasn't he meant to race and last minute he couldn't? And that opened up the spot.
That certainly could be. Yeah.
I'm certain that was it. Like he had something, an injury or a crash, something happened.
Yeah.
And he couldn't race. and you were the younger brother. I mean, your brother was the good one. Exactly. From memory, I mean, in the team, like he was older than you, wasn't he? And quite strong on the domestic scene at that point. And I'm pretty sure that was how the position even opened up in the first place. And then obviously Glenn had he obviously saw something, not really. A lovely guy for giving me that opportunity.
He got a good report somewhere. Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Your cycling career is like literally, figuratively, timeline, chronologically, it's all over the map. But before we even talk about cycling, you mentioned it, like you're a professional rower. You're an Olympic rower. You're a world champion. You have a world championship to your name. How do you, like, looking just purely at that phase of your life, how do you get into rowing? I mean, I think Australia and the US have very different tracks in terms of how you get on the Olympic sporting track. How do you find that you're good at this sport and then ultimately make it to the Olympics?
Yeah, it was, I guess, that immersion of that level. And when I was 12, 13, just starting high school, there was a guy that had won an Olympic gold medal. His name was Stephen Hawkins from Tasmania in Barcelona. And, I mean, this was 96 by then, so it was around Atlanta Olympics time. But he'd ended up getting quite sick racing in Mexico City a couple of years later. He was leading the men's single final and at altitude. I mean, he was from Tasmania. He knew nothing about it. He literally exploded, and hasn't been able to exercise ever since. Like,
oh wow!
It gives you an idea of how hard that guy could push himself. I mean, he went from like one of the greatest athletes to basically having chronic fatigue at an extreme level.
Wow.
But he got into abalone diving, which my dad was a bit of a pioneer of that industry, and so he was at our house all the time learning. And Dad was showing him on maps back in those days. There was no Google, where you dive, where you fish, And I was just fascinated by this guy that was the hero of Tasmania, first ever Olympic gold medalist. And he was learning, from my dad, like sitting there listening and treating him with respect. And of course, when you in high school, rowing's a sport. So when that became an option, I was like, yeah, I want to try that. And I was 13, and then, because I met Stephen, I wanted to go to the Olympics, and obviously rowing became the sport that I was good at through school because I stuck at it every year, and that was the reason I pursued it. As I kept getting older, I had that dream from quite a young age of getting to the games, and I probably should have dreamed about winning gold because it didn't matter what they got me to do. I was able to do it. They said, okay, we're so young, you're going to have to win an under 23 world title to even be a chance. So, did that easily the year before and then obviously made the team. But, yeah, the jump up in rowing, I mean, there's the underage level, unlike cycling we see now. But then you get to the Olympics and those guys are men. They're new racing and the Olympics is the thing. It's like you've done the Tour de France. It's like we get that once every 4 years. So you can only imagine, well, you understand the Olympic concept, with track cycling, the men's pursuit and all that. It has that same. So obviously the experienced Olympians are another level above the underage rowing. So we just literally got blown out of the water there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was basically how it happened. It was just the seed planted by that Stephen Hawkins at our house, and tried it at school and had the dream of going to the games. And it was the sport that I was best at. That was an Olympic sport, and stuck at it and got there. So yeah.
So. Yeah, great story. I mean, cool, super cool connection with your dad. Not that pro cycling is any clear career path of what you're going to do next, but take that shift to Olympic level rowing. Like, what does one do with the title of an Olympic rower? Had you not pursued cycling sort of by happenstance, what do you suppose you would be doing had you said, I'm going to keep on this rowing path or what?
Well, it was funny because after the games, I'd thought I would go and play Australian rules football. I was pretty good at that, and I thought I'd get drafted. I'd go back and nominate for the draft, and they'd take me because I was good at this sport, and I'm sure they would have. I would have figured that out, I think. But because we didn't do well at the games, I obviously set my sights on the next Olympics, and then it was during that next Olympiad we'd just been fourth at the Worlds, and I got injured, and that was when So it was 2006 when I got on the bike and had to give it a rest to be ready for Beijing. We're on a nice progression towards the games and had to give it a proper rest. And that was when I got into the bike and started riding. And obviously reasonably well. And I was also at uni doing economics and finance. And
That's right.
I guess that was where I knew I'd need to get a career and get a job. So all of a sudden, cycling presented an opportunity to actually have a career of getting paid to exercise. And that sounded way more exciting than the finance economics degree that I was doing. I still finished that, but that was sort of how it made the decision mid-Olympiad. I mean, you'd think, I would have stuck it out till Beijing and then maybe had a look at it, but it was honestly the career point that you talk about that made me jump at that point, knowing that, I can make some money out of cycling and it might save me getting a desk job for a little bit longer.
Well, whatever you're doing to kick the can down the road, it continues to work. So let me walk through some of these teams and correct me if I'm out of line with what I found on Wikipedia. We do, the stint with Priority Health. Then what? Chinelli OPD, is that an Australian team?
No, it was just like a domestic, but the Australian team placed me there just for a period.
Where was that? What country was that?
It was in Italy. It was just the kind of so Shane Bannon, he was really amazing to me in those early days. He was firm but fair, I guess would be, I remember, and he basically said, we could put you on the national team, but you won't learn anything. So I'm going to throw you in an Italian team where you're going to have to learn the language, you're going to have to figure out instincts and fast track your, knowledge and education. And then, but during that year, I was on the shadow squad for the Olympic team, which was crazy because I'd done the Worlds in my first year in the sport. So they found a place on an Austrian pro-continental team, which allowed me to do, some high-level racing. And I was actually the reserve for the games that year. So There was a camp just before the 08 games. There was Cadell Evans, Stuart O'Grady, Simon Gerrans, Matthew Lloyd. And I'm trying to think of, it might have been Adam Hansen, the last guy. And Cadell had just got second at the tour and he'd hurt his knee on the dance floor and they didn't know if he'd go. And we're in Varazzi and I was training with them. So that actually had me racing at that high level just in case they had to send me to the games, which would have been pretty crazy to go to 2 consecutive Olympics in different sports. And that was sort of the closest I've come to the Olympics since. So that was why there was that change in teams that year. But that was all sort of part of the national program. And I was living in Varazzi with the, Simon Clark, Wes Salzberg, all those guys are in the national team at that time.
Okay.
But I'd obviously go off to race, with my own team.
And backtrack. You basically began the pursuit of cycling in 2006?
7. I did Worlds in rowing in 06. Yeah.
Okay. So there you are about to race the 2008 Olympics in your second year of cycling. Very good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I forgot. Did you do a year with Fuji Servetto?
That was 09, but I got glandular fever. Okay. And at that point, that was in August. And they'd sent me the first race I ever did. I'm in Andorra now.
Sure.
And I remember Dan Martin won the stage. It's funny, I keep in touch. He still lives here. I keep in touch with him a lot. And it's just down the road here at Powell. It was the finish, and he won. And I was in the top 20.
Yeah.
And that was my first ever World Tour race. So I ended up top 20 that race. But then I went to everyone expected a lot of me. I was going to get better, and I just got worse and worse and tighter. And it was actually just before Worlds. They'd already pre-selected me for Worlds, from the start of the year. And I was in Italy, and Aldo Sassi, my coach, obviously now it's passed, but he said there's something wrong here. You're just not recovering, and sent me off for a blood exam. Sure enough, I had glandular fever. Anyway, they still let me race Worlds because they thought that you can feel all right for a day.
Yeah,
I didn't. But it really hurt. I thought that, I don't know if this is going to be for me. I'm racing at the highest level. I've raced the best guys. It took a lot out of me. I mean, I had quite a few months off, and then it wasn't until into 2010 that I got healthy again. And again, the federation had a great relationship with Savio, Matt Wilson, Baden Cook, a bunch of guys had gone through that program.
Yeah. And
they spoke to him and said, Gianni, we went in February when it looked like I was going to be okay and I could sort of try again.
Yep.
It was sort of like that, try again. And he said absolutely, and took me on. And I had a great year with Michele Scarponi, and then instead of doing my second year with them was when I came and joined you at Liquigas, and then that was that.
Did you? So sorry, 2009. Did you race the Giro with Fuji?
No, I didn't do a Grand Tour that year.
But you did. Okay, so 2010 is when our
I did the Giro.
Former Tour of Georgia teammates for a week, Priority Health. See you in the Pro Tour. The next thing I know, 3 years later, there we are racing the Giro together.
Yeah.
And I just remember being so flummoxed because I had never expected to make it to the World Tour. I was perfectly content racing in the States. And so I was sort of as blown away that I had made it there, and there I am in my first Grand Tour as like, I think on the opposite end of the spectrum is you, who just, it's almost as though you just do things sort of linearly, like with the expectation, not like a egotistical expectation, just like, no, linearly, like I will be in a Grand Tour. And so you're like, oh, hey mate. I'm like, my mind is blown.
Richie Port's first Grand Tour that you almost won.
That's right. Yeah. Best young rider. He had a smashing race. Yeah. So, talk to me. I mean, you hit on a few of the highs and lows and bouncing around teams before we even make it to Liquigas, and then I guess integrating into the Liquigas conversation. What was Italian cycling culture is crazy.
It was then.
I mean, I think if you're an Italian, it probably feels less so, but especially coming from Anglo background, it just feels so wild. What do you look back on that sliver of life and see? Was it crazy? Was it fun? Was it totally
Honestly,
normal?
It was how I envisaged it, because I'd grown up rowing in Varese, with the national team. We trained there, and I'd seen Basso training, I'd seen Cadell train, I'd seen these guys on the road. I remember staying at the Palace Hotel. I don't know if you stayed there in Varese for Tre Valley, the one up on the top of the hill, that big old, and we'd be there, and the teams would all roll into town because we'd be there in sort of August for Tre Valley Veracene and the other races around there, and I'd just be fascinated by it. So that romantic part of cycling for me was what drew me to it. And when I decided to pursue it, I just envisaged that was the life that I'd have. I lived in that town, and it was to be a rider, especially for, Liquigas-Cannondale. That was the team in those days. I mean, it was the number one team, I think, in the world when we went there. And so, to be in Italy as a part of that team, you just felt like a real sports person. And I really do miss. I mean, I'm glad I had I wouldn't say I miss it. I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to be a part of that. Because I really don't think. From speaking, I mean, as you know, Elia Viviani was a teammate still the last few years, and it doesn't sound like it's like that in Italy anymore. In fact, it's quite a shame. I think how their cycling teams have kind of gone or disappeared, and even the culture there of the people, as far as embracing it and whatever else. So, I think we really lived in a bit of a golden age, or we're part of a golden age of Italian cycling still, or the end of it. It was really, really beautiful to be a part of, and especially just their little, things of how they fed us and trained us, and couldn't let us do this, and you couldn't do that. You should do this, and I mean, it's now you look back on it, it's just really quite beautiful.
It's great, and with the benefit of hindsight, I don't miss boiled spinach dinners. But I don't know. There's something to be said about it.
It worked for a lot of them. I mean,
sure.
That was what they used. What worked.
Well, okay. So great example. Elia Viviani, one of my greatest recollections. I mean, if you say Elia Viviani and Italian cycling food, one of the few things I think about is he only ate white food. You are now teammates with him a decade later. Does he eat anything besides potato, pasta, rice, and chicken?
No. He doesn't change. It took me about halfway through the classics to pick up on that again. I was just thinking, that's right. He just doesn't eat anything different and gets so excited if he sees a Starbucks.
Exactly. Amazing. You mentioned like being around Bosso. I remember you and he were friends. You were connected. Was he part of the connection that ended up landing you on Liquigas, or did you have a manager? Or how do you suppose you landed on Liquigas itself?
So I remember I was at Tre Valley very soon, actually, and Aldo was still alive then. He had his brain tumor, he was unwell, but he was at the start. And I was talking to him, and at that point I had quite a bit of interest because, I'd been sick, I'd had glandular, I'd come back. As I said, I went to the Giro. I think I showed myself well. I'd done some other good stuff with Scarponi. He was changing teams, so I had an option to go with him to Lamprey. Sky was starting. We'd sort of spoken to them. But it was really all through the national, like Shane Bannon and obviously Green Edge. So then there was that. They were sort of trying to place us somewhere if they wanted us to go to Green Edge for that year. And Saxo Bank or CSC was another, what it was called then. Mm-hmm. But that particular day, Roberto Amadeo came over to speak to Aldo while I was speaking with him. And, of course, Aldo introduced him and said whatever. And I went the breakaway that day, and by the time I got to the finish line, he'd actually, he called Savio, about me going there and not knowing how long I was meant to be with Savio and etc. Just out of courtesy, and then and also he called Aldo during the race and just basically said, they really wanted me to go there, and obviously I was quite excited about that because I'd met Ivan training around Varese, and he was a bit of quite the man at that point. Well, I guess he'd had his ban, he'd come back. Yeah. He'd won 2010, the Giro that we did. But I was fascinated from him from prior to all that when he used to race Lance, as a guy that could take it to Lance. And really, when Ulrich wasn't there, Basso was the one that kind of stood up as his greatest rival. And we all loved following that. So that seemed just like a bit of a dream come true to go and ride for him. But literally it happened all there in Varese on that particular day, and it was really special that Aldo was a big part of it all as well. So
And I've sort of forgotten how ingrained you are in Italian culture all throughout. And I mean, shoot, it's kind of crazy that it all goes back to your rowing, to be honest. Yeah,
that town. I mean, I first went there in 2002 or 3, and I visit there still there most years. So, I mean, I'm still very close to all the Mappe crowd and all of that. So, it's really cool to reflect. I mean, honestly, I've never really reflected on all this like this. I hope people find this interesting because it's really interesting for me to think back and how it all pieced together. And,
it's such a wild ride. I am certain that people will enjoy this. And we're going to continue on the chronology because, I thought it was 4 years. I forgot that you did it 1 year with Champion System. You're back with Cannondale Pro Cycling. And then in 2015, you are, probably 32 years old, if my math is right.
Yeah.
Your road career, independent of this second coming that you're in the midst of now, independent of your triathlon career, you inadvertently stumble upon gravel in the form of winning BWR San Diego 2015. Now, often people will be like, Ted, you're the first World Tour guy to go to gravel. And I'm like, I accept that claim and praise until I see this stat and I'm like, oh, wait, no. Cam Wurf did it a year before me. Talk about an 8. That's gravel before gravel, right? I imagine you did that on a road bike.
I did on Synapse. Okay. I think it was the first time I ever used tubeless tires.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. And it was, there weren't really many, I'd say, cyclists.
Yeah.
I think Phil Tinsman was the man in those days, a local legend down there, and he'd been apparently second in it a bunch of times. And I flattered at some point, and I'd already stopped to help him change a flat early, and he left me there.
Yeah.
When the group was quite small. Ryan Trebone was there. That's right.
Yeah.
Probably I shouldn't be so disrespectful. I guess he's was some sort of a cyclist.
Yeah.
Anyway, I ended up having to chase him down. And I was so annoyed that left me behind when I'd helped him that I just dropped him on double peak and rode to the finish. And I always said I didn't win it. I just got to the finish line before everyone else. I didn't realize it was a race.
I rode faster than the other guys.
I mean, I've spent my life competing. I didn't think this was a competition, but yeah, that was certainly. I mean, I remember using speed plate pedals, and there was a mud section I had to get off and run through, and they just, by the time I got to the finish, I hadn't unclipped for a long time after that section. They just caked on. I remember we put the bike on the bar and gave everyone a chance to try. No one could get them off.
Oh, my God.
And, and Win Allen, our mechanic at Wins Wheels, he ended up he said, yeah, I'll fix it. And he took the pedals off and handed me the shoes. He said, have you got new pedals?
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
And you're going to need some new shoes.
You don't need to get them bronzed. You get them muddied.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. So I think that they're still at Robbie somewhere. We sort of had them as a bit of a trophy. Robbie, our mutual friend Robbie Schaefer out there in Calabasas, the peddler's fork man. But so that sort of was pretty cool. I mean, it was just part of that year. I was looking for a job in finance and doing some brand ambassador stuff for Cannondale while I was, piecing my way through the world to try and finally go into a proper career, which is, what I'd always sort of wanted to do was go to the US and work in finance. And I guess I just kept doing enough events that it sort of prolonged that juncture again enough to find something that I'm now doing that became another career, in Ironman. So,
I love what you said about getting a flat, servicing it, and then going on to ride faster than the other people. My first Unbound victory, the exact same thing happened. 2 flats on the side of the road. Gone are the days of ever having a flat and being able to come back to have anything resembling a result. But that also just speaks to this astronomical growth that gravel has gone through in professionalization.
I mean, I think that's why I didn't really make a big deal of it at the time because, as I said, compared to the level we were racing at, it kind of, I should be able to finish the course quicker than ever. But in my mind, I figured we'd ride together and we'd just finish,
Yeah.
I know, but because of it sort of evolved, and I was so annoyed at what I saw as a lack of sportsmanship, whereas really it was just that everyone else saw it as a race.
Yeah.
I thought, okay, well, I'll get to the line before a lot of you then. But I guess there was a tipping point in the sport, to be fair, without patting myself on the back too much, where it did start to encourage a bit more industry investment in athletes to go and do these events, and you certainly then boomed that to careers for guys. That, I mean, I don't even think you in yourself had that vision for you, but you've laid the pathway for others to actually have that be their career, which is, I'm sure, blows your mind a bit too. Yeah.
It's why. I mean, it just speaks to how young the sport is. That less than a decade ago, the pathway didn't exist, and then we're basically sort of creating it on the fly. So, okay, continuing along this chronology, you don't. I joke. I said it tongue in cheek that you were a gravel racer. You had success in a gravel race, off-road race, but you're basically taking this time, intentionally or unintentionally, to get into triathlon. Like, there's a 2015 through 2020. That's effectively exclusively what you're doing. So, you can't fake success in triathlon because it is a ton of work, and obviously it's a bunch of cumulated work and cumulative work that you've done over the course of the previous 15 years, 2 decades of your life.
Yeah.
How is that transition? Are you going in with blinders on saying, I'm trying to become a triathlete, or are you purely trying to just get out your endurance endorphins in 3 sports?
Yeah.
And how does that work?
I'll be brutally honest. I honestly wanted to work in the finance world. I didn't really know. I kind of thought I'd go and work on Wall Street like everyone does. But then when I went out to LA, I was like, well, I don't really want to go to Wall Street. I want to be out here, and then learn about Century City and them having their own little finance world. And then through Robbie, of course, started to meet people in that world that had their own firms and whatever else. But during that time, was doing this brand ambassador stuff for Cannondale. And the idea of doing triathlons, honestly, was about not looking like a cyclist when I went into the real world, like getting a body back, doing some swimming, doing some running, just feeling it. this sounds stupid, but athletic.
Yeah.
And I think that's like what we're seeing now in modern cycling is these guys are athletes. They're allowing them to be athletes. I mean, you and I would literally get, Murray Utso would shoot us with an air pistol if he could, if he saw us doing anything more than a brisk walk, at a Liquigas camp back in those days. Like you weren't allowed to be anything other than a cyclist. An athlete was off the cards.
Uh-huh.
It was a different thing. And so that was how that worked out. And, so I did a half Ironman, which was Oceanside, which was a Cannondale event and with Sonny Garcia, and that was cool. And then Sonny that year was going to Kona, and I thought, well, that'd be cool to go to Kona with him. So Cannondale were also involved, or Segoy, with Ironman in Canada. So I said, I'll go and do that. And I went and did that. And I actually did quite well. And personally, I was like, man, I actually feel like I'm naturally, because I really didn't prepare for it. I just wanted to do it and sort of hopefully qualify.
Yeah.
But I actually seemed to have a bit of a natural aptitude to the sport. Like the longer the day went on, the better I felt, and the worse everyone else around me looked. And so I qualified for Kona. But then a couple of weeks later, I was in Downeyville at that mountain bike festival with Mark Weir.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Of course, he sent me down something and whacked my foot on a tree and broke a few bones in my foot. So I was like, well, I might never get to do Kona ever again. I mean, it's a bucket list event. It was kind of like running the New York Marathon last year after Kona. Yeah. But so I'm going. I got the cast off that week, went and did Kona, swam, rode, pretty well. But it was funny because you start behind all the women, and I almost caught Daniela Reef at about the airport, and then I blew up so bad because I had a moon boot on for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And I started drifting backwards, and I was just like, I hope no one can see this, like she was riding away from me. So I got out on the run course, and then all the women just came ripping past me,
Yeah.
But I got up onto the Queen K quickly enough, and this was definitely the moment that I got to see Frodeno coming the other way, coming into Winnie's first Kona.
Yeah.
And I guess this will allude to what I said to you all those years ago at Tour of Georgia, and this might probably won't surprise you when you think about what I thought, but I looked at him and I thought, I reckon I can do that.
Yeah.
I reckon I can beat him. So there I am with a broken foot, basically walking, and there's the fittest guy on the planet running the other way. Oh, and I looked at him and thought, I reckon I can race you.
I can do that. It looks like he's having fun.
Yeah, so 15, there was certainly no, and until that moment, there was no vision of becoming a triathlete or anything. It was really just circumstance of, yes, wanting to be fit and healthy that year while I was looking for a job and be able to run and swim and surf and do whatever, and meeting Sonny Garcia, my friendship with him that took me to Kona. But then that moment out on the Queen K when I saw Jan running the other way, and I just thought, you know what, I reckon I can be up there.
Yeah.
And then sort of 16 became that sort of, do a bit more, start to experiment a bit with the concept, but still not 100% jump into it. It wasn't until sort of November I did a proper Ironman where I'd done some training and really made my mind up, look, I think I can do this.
Yeah.
Like I'd actually, during that year, found a place I wanted to work. I'd even started doing some, I think it was my Series 67, doing my study for that and getting my licenses, etc. But yeah, come the end of 16, I decided, and with a lot of support from actually Ethan, who I was going to work with, he and his family have been to watch me in every Kona since. Huh. And, he said, this is all here for you down the road. I mean, you can only be an athlete for a certain period of your life, and don't waste that opportunity. So that was sort of what made it easy for me to make that decision.
Sure, that's amazing. How about? Did you ever feel like a fish out of water? I mean, obviously you have a cycling background. You're not going to flail at cycling. Like, okay, you have a broken foot as a result of a mountain bike accident, but like, was there any of the three sports a particular detriment? Was swimming hard? Was running hard? As being Australian, you grow up swimming, and I'd swim at school in the school team. So even without training much, I could swim. Yeah. And I was, thanks to cycling, I had some pack skills. I noticed that, like, following the feet. You learn how much easier it is to follow feet. You fight like hell. It's like fighting for a wheel. So, I had that race instinct to get me through the swim. And then in those days, there weren't, the Sam Laidlow's, Magnus Ditlevs around now that have
come through and really sort of pushed the sport to another level as far as on the bike goes, I guess, with, combining the tech with, horsepower. And so I had quite a significant advantage over everyone, but also I had an advantage because they knew I couldn't run. So they could afford to give me a bigger lead. I mean, I'm sure guys could ride as hard as me even back then, but me not being a threat. But obviously it was when I started to run well, once I got to Kona in 19, that they'd all figured out, okay, we have to ride as well as him and then, keep our run. And that was when there was a big jump in the sport, which incidentally Jan won.
Yeah.
But I kind of went into, I guess, 2019 Kona. I mean, 17, I'd qualified. I went there, broke the bike course record for the first time, but sort of hobbled through the marathon and finished 17th. The next year, broke it again and sort of ran a bit quicker in the marathon, but not much, came 9th. Yeah. And then 19, I'd rocked up. I'd won, every race I'd entered that year and was a big favourite. And Jan and Tim O'Donnell and a couple of others teamed up in the swim and dropped the hammer and got away. And then I didn't even get to them on the bike quite. And then, of course, I'd killed myself trying to get to them. And then Jan and O'Donnell ran away and Kinley, ran through me. And who else? Oh, Ben Hoffman, another American.
No way. Yeah.
Caught me in the final. Yeah, the Hoff passed me in about the last. I'll never forget those beautiful calf muscles ripping down Polani Hill as he went past me, at the side of the line, and I ended up 5th. But that was sort of like the turning point in the sport where these guys learned to ride. I mean, it was honestly like 10 minutes quicker, but also kept their run. Yeah. So it wasn't they couldn't do it; they just hadn't had to figure it out. Yeah. Because been a stronger cyclist that had figured out how to run to back up that bike leg. So so that was I kind of, I guess I always felt pretty comfortable in the sport because I could swim well enough that I could get to the front. Yep. And it was just a case of learning then how to stay there for as long as possible, and really that became pretty simple. It just came down to learning how to run. Yeah. So I didn't feel like I was a fish out of water because I just had never run before, so I just had to put in the work. Impressive.
I mean, you mentioned it. Maybe I'm beating a dead horse here. You are a very good time trialist. You're not a world tour winning time trialist, but then you go and break the course record for a handful of years there in Ironman. You alluded to it. Like, what is the level? What is the riding level allowing you to go in and just sort of smash these guys? Like, are they using it almost as like, is the cycling leg up until the point that you're racing it, is it almost just a transition between running and swimming?
Well, at that point, when I came in, 100% it was for these guys. They just used it to get to the run and then have a running race. And then, as I said, as I learned to run, they then figured, okay, we've got to figure this out. And next thing, they started riding quicker, but the run times didn't improve at all for a long, long period of time. And then now, just in the last few years, well, really since COVID, we've started to see some fast runs off some fast bikes as well. But the actual level, it's funny because, as you know, I trained with, well, everyone, yourself, but Basso, Scarponi, obviously more recently Froome, G when they're winning the Tour de France, Richie Porte a lot of the time. So I've always been exposed to kind of the best athletes around. And, you go and do a 15 minutes up a climb or whatever, they do what they do on TV. They kick your ass. But, we would, Tim Kerrison had Froome and I and G, particularly in those days. Well, Froome and I originally, and then G in 18. We used to call them half Ironman efforts. It was basically 2 hours on the TT bike as hard as you could go. And it was the most feared session we had all week. It was like a tank emptier for 2 hours. And Froome, we'd start 15 metres apart, like Tim would call it, literally a half Ironman effort. And often I'd end up, well, not often, almost always, I would be the strongest of that. It's sort of like around an hour and a half, an hour 45, there was like this, I mean, Froome had never spent that much time on a TT bike, and at this point I'd already done a bit of Ironman stuff, and and same with G. I mean, we would do them with G. For you to picture it, we'd start at where actually I think I spotted you on the road near the petrol station there at the end of Zuma Beach. Yeah. We'd sort of start there. We'd go up to the strawberry fields. We'd do 2 laps around there and then blast back towards Malibu and finish around Malibu somewhere. Would be around 2 hours, normally at the hill at the end of Zuma.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'd be better than him pretty much all the time. So then if we did another hour, I remember one day with Froomey riding, we were in Chatel and we rode to the Galibier, but we did the first 4 hours on the time trial bike. And after 3 hours, he was like, "Oh, can we change bikes?" And I said, "I know you can just like sit on my wheel if you like you can just go a bit easier." But it's just like the position and the muscles. I mean, it's different. It's just different. And these are the best cyclists on the planet at that time. I mean, they're both winning the Tour. Yeah. So when people ask about the level and whatever else, I say it's so different. It's like saying the 4K individual pursuit on the track, comparing it to the world champion often it's the same guy like a Ghana or whatever. Yeah. But there's a very different type of engine, obviously, physiology, being able to hold that position. But I think what people most underestimate, as we've seen with, say, an Andrew Talansky or an Adam Hansen who have tried to go across much more credentialed than me in cycling, is the swim. I mean, it's 50 minutes, and if you can't swim well, you're doing 50 minutes above threshold.
Sure.
So what's it like doing 50 minutes of threshold on the bike and then riding for 4 hours? I don't think anyone would feel that strong. And because we saw with those guys, I mean, I don't know if they ever had fast bike splits, let alone got close to qualifying for Kona, to even think about going to Kona and breaking a record. I mean, they never even went. Mm-hmm. And it's not that they're not amazing athletes. It's just a very different type of effort. And I've seen that time and time on the bike. No. But yeah, it's just different. It's just very different. And the fact that I can kind of jump between sports right now, I just think means that I've just got a very different physiology to a lot of people.
Many years in the making, clearly. So one thing I remember about you is that, in that time away, as you're getting into a triathlon, and maybe even towards the tail end of the time in the World Tour, is you would often talk about connections to Sky and connections to Pinarello, and honestly, I just like roll my eyes. I'm like, well, if you were going to be on Sky, you'd be on Sky. And furthermore, at that point, like more time is ticking away from the World Tour. So again, it's like the next thing I know, there's Cam Wurf on Ineos. So what is the connection that ultimately lands you on Ineos? Is it riding with Froomey and G or what? Yeah. Like, how do you land that contract?
No, well, not originally. It goes a long way back to literally. I mean, and I wasn't joking at that point. There was a couple of times I almost went during that period, and either I still had a contract with Cannondale or they didn't have a spot that year or whatever. Right. But Tim Kerrison, who obviously is the mastermind behind, guy just for the Olympics, but he wasn't a federation coach. So they'd actually given it to an older, more experienced coach. I'm going to swimming then, and worked with the Olympic swim team in Athens, and then got poached by the Brits for 2008 to help them get ready for London. And then, of course, got poached by Dave before they even got to London to, build Team Sky with him as their coach. And he'd always kept in touch. He was always interested in the fact that I was a rower and, that history, and that I'd made it to where I'd made it. And now he was in cycling. But it never just quite worked out. And then I was at home in 2017. And at that point, I hadn't really made up my mind whether I'd pursue triathlon or go back and work with Ethan. And I got a random phone call from Tim Kerrison. It was in January, and I'd been home. I'd been training with Richie, and he'd gone to Tour Down Under, and he looked great shape. He ended up going on to win it, but Tim had just gone down for a couple of days before because Owen Doull was there, and he'd got appendicitis. And Kenny Ellison was on the Gold Coast with Chris for a training camp at Tim Kerrison's house. So Doull was in hospital. Tim had flown Kenny down to, get him ready settle him in with the team and whatever, catch up with the team. and saw Richie. Richie looked in great shape. He's like, "Bloody hell, Richie." Said, "Yeah, Wurf's been home. We've been training hard." And Tim said, "Shit, he's still fit." And Richie said, "Yeah. He's living in the US, but he's still in shape." Invited me up to the Gold Coast to train with Chris Froome for 2 weeks. I was on the phone. I said, "Well, I've got a couple of things on, but I'll come up in a couple of days or whatever. That sounds great." My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, was next to me, said, "Who's that?" I explained it to her. She said, "You ring him back and tell him you'll be there tomorrow." I mean, this guy, he's invited you, the guy was right with it. She knew nothing really about cycling, but she knew about the Tour de France. She said, "The guy that won the Tour de France wants to train with you for the next couple of weeks." I said, "Yeah, it seems a bit strange." So I went up there, trained with Froome. Turns out I still had, the engine.
Yeah.
And at the end of that was when Tim said, "Well, what do you want to do? Do you want to come back to cycling?" Because do you want to come back and race with Sky now? They had a spot at that point. And I said, "Well, I've been interested in Ironman." And he said, "Well, maybe we can support you to do that then, and you can train with the guys and we'll find you some sponsors and yada, yada, yada." And that was really how it started again. And so we talked about me coming back on the team for a few years, but I got better and better at Ironman, and I really just spent more time swimming and running than I needed to worry about the bike, because I was sort of a lot better than everyone at that point in the bike. And then obviously COVID-19 happened, and I was fifth and really showing like I was up there. And that was when Dave B said, "Okay, now we're going to put you on the roster. You're going to be our backup guy in case any of the guys get sick or injured." Because often I'd be at camps and someone would get injured and they'd go to a race and they're one short and they'd say, "Oh, God, we should just take Wurf." But I wasn't on the team. So that was sort of the vision. But then, of course, COVID hit. So that kind of just sort of changed the whole landscape of everything. And, I almost ended up exclusively raced on the bike that year and sort of into 21 as well. And it's sort of taken a couple of years for me to get back to actually focusing on triathlon, if I'm honest.
What a juggle. Yeah. To be purely a World Tour cyclist means like you're in the track of the team, right? I mean, they tell you need to go to this camp, or at the beginning of the year, it's basically laid out. This is your, ideal schedule. And if everything goes well with health and so on and so forth, this is the track you're on. You're on both that track, but then also an individual track in order to do Ironmans and to be qualifying for races. How does that whole globe-trotting, jump around the world training schedule? Furthermore, you also at some point, I think since COVID, become a parent. Like, how does this puzzle piece work together?
I got a great wife that loves spending a lot of time with our son. So
there you go. Hats off to the wife.
I definitely would not be able to. We say that, and I guess you say it wishy-washy, but it's actually really true in my case. I mean, my life really hasn't changed a lot since we had a kid, apart from the fact that, any spare moment I have, I want to be with him and a part of what he's doing as much as I can, but realise that I have to provide for them as well. So, and I think my dad being a fisherman, I'm quite good at compartmentalising the reality of the world in that regard, and I think still being a good dad. But yeah, with the team, as I said, I was meant to be the triathlete that just filled in when they needed someone, and because I was capable of that, you sort of could jump in and not change the schedule of a bunch of people. Because if a rider comes out of something, as you remember, it kind of shuffles a lot of things around. So I was meant to be an outside guy sitting on the outside of the team. That, okay, we're a man down for Paris-Roubaix. In you come, like if you can help, great. If you can't, well, we're a man down anyway, so it doesn't matter. And but unfortunately, over the couple of years, I guess the team, our performances, we've struggled, particularly this past year. I sort of just started doing all the races that people just didn't want to do, and doing my job, I did it. But then that was very disruptive to my preparation for Ironman. So qualifying for Kona became more of a challenge, more because I just knowing when I could race. I mean, often I'd plan a race and then I'd get called into a race, so I couldn't go to that race. I mean, last year, for example, I qualified in South Africa, but that week I raced Amstel Gold on the Sunday, Flèche-Wallonne on the Wednesday, flew to South Africa, and I raced on the Sunday. And I was actually leading the Ironman until 5K to go on the run.
Yeah.
And I just ran out of gas, man. I remember that day I had 3 nootropics gels on the run. So that's 600 milligrams plus however much Coke. Had one before the start. I would have had over 1,000 milligrams of caffeine in that 7.5 hours or whatever. And the hotel was across the road. And from that week, I was just so spent that I did the presentation, as I said, ended up third, but I qualified, walked across the road into the hotel, straight into the shower, jumped into bed and was sound asleep. I was, normally you're so wide after an Ironman, you don't sleep for 2 days with all the sugar and crap and everything in your system, and you're so poor. So, yeah, it became, all of a sudden, okay, you're basically the last guy on the cycling team because you're the guy that's prepared to go anywhere, anytime. And you've got to try and figure out your hobby. And so, and that sort of corresponded with the sport, obviously, post-COVID, going like this, where, guys started figuring stuff out, how to ride as fast as me, how to train like I did. Then they got better with aerodynamics. The fast swimmers started learning if we get together and get a big group, we can ride as a big group, and it's kind of like an echelon. It's a momentum at the front of the race, so the guys are behind. It's so hard to catch up now because the speed's higher up there, so you've got to be so much stronger to get there.
Yeah.
It was the sport just a bit like, as you've seen with gravel, just moved on at a time when I was like not checking out, but I didn't have the time to go with them. I was just trying to survive, and hang in there. And and I think that it's sort of probably more, and I'm not patting myself on the back, but I think it's more mind over matter when I think about the results that I've had, which have, it's pretty rare I'm not on the podium. And if I go to World Championships, it's rare I'm not in the top 10. Still, despite not really taking it that seriously, or as seriously as I could. I think, again, goes back to what I felt when I did my first Ironman, that I think I have a bit of a natural aptitude to the sport of Ironman triathlon. I think it's a good one for me. So, this year is about really kind of honing in on that and focusing more on that. I'm not saying I won't race on the bike. I certainly won't in the first part of the year. We'll have a look in the summer. But, this first part of the year, I'm just going to really back to basics. I'm actually in the pool a lot at the moment. I've got a new coach here. We're working hard to try and seal the deal, Worlds in September.
That'd be wild. That'd be awesome. You just hit on the sport of triathlon going through a big change, especially during the COVID era. Gravel, the same in the past half dozen years. You might be an N of one that raced in the World Tour and professional cycling in the 2010 era, which was, we were in the nutritional stone age on Liquigas through the present. And like World Tour cycling, beginning with that first race, what they do?
It's funny though, I'll just pull you up on one thing. You know how like we used to laugh about the paninis? Like that was like Benzina. They tell us like, you do not need gels. Yeah. You do not need anything fancy. You just need these bread buns, and we did anything we could to avoid them. Now with all the stuff we have, man, if you see a panini, it is like gold, something different. Like I think back, I was like, man, Mini Munya would be so proud of me, or Big Munya. Sorry.
Remember the temperature had to be right in order to have a Nutella panini? Yeah.
He was below 10.
How times have changed. So World Tour cycling went through this big transformation also. This is from the other side of a computer screen, television screen, just me watching it. With like, gone are the days of the all-day breakaway. It's like the all-day breakaway earns 2.5 minutes max, and then it's Cam Wurf on the front pulling it back. So like, what has been that experience like to see it firsthand? Because you are one of very few who have seen this massive transition in the sport of World Tour cycling.
Yeah, I really have admired. I really feel like I'm fortunate to have come back when I came back. And honestly, I think the current state almost suits me better, because one of the issues I had, and you would probably know, people would give me crap about training too hard. When I was, I trained too hard and I was always tired of races and I didn't know what I was doing. But also I was coming from Australia. We used to smash sugar. Like we used to eat a lot of
Lollies.
carb. Yeah, always. I mean, lollies, exactly. I mean, like you and I, as you know, my Swedish fish fetish. I mean,
Yes.
I've just always had that, and actually that was something in 17 that when I came into Ironman, we actually started working on this a long time before anyone talked about it. So Froomey, obviously, when he won the Giro, that was like a big point that we'd worked on throughout that year and done some, 100, 120 grams, and we're actually, working with SIS and developing different times, like, undercover, the beta fuel was already there, but no one else sort of knew about it. And so that was quite an exciting period for me. But in that first period, I was always quite frustrated cycling because I didn't feel like I could do what I believed was the right way. So people would second guess my training methods. They would second guess the way I wanted to eat. And that would make me second guess myself. And it was one reason I was kind of happy to walk away from the sport, because I just didn't feel like I was getting the most out of myself.
Yeah.
Whereas now, and particularly running, we work on sort of a 6-day schedule. And for the last few years, running, every run for me has been hard, as I built up to my running, like up to 19 and 2019 and 2020. So I was used to training 6 days a week. So when I went to the Vuelta that year, I mean, I just got stronger and stronger and stronger. And everyone was like, what the? You haven't ridden in the World Tour in 6 years.
Yeah.
And you just waltz back in. And, Carapaz and Roglic, it was one of the most exciting Grand Tours ever. I mean, they were separated by a handful of seconds at the finish line in Madrid.
Uh-huh.
It was crazy. I mean, chopping and changing with the jersey.
Yep.
We lost a guy on the first day. We lost another guy during the race with COVID. Then we lost another guy because he got sick. So we were down to 5 guys, and it was Froomey, Dylan Van Baal, myself, Carapaz, and Andre Amador.
Yeah.
So we had 5 strong guys, but it was pretty hard against the full team of jumbos. And but I must admit, like, because of all of a sudden I'd gone back to that training method where every day was hard, I actually was quite used to the sport. I actually really enjoyed the Grand Tour where every day was hard and then every 6th day you got a rest day. It was actually quite like my routine. So without wanting to, but the biggest point for me is, and Pavel Sivakov and I have been speaking about this the last couple of weeks training together, is, it's not as social, like we're training, we've actually renamed, I'm going to take this from, I think Pavel's already leaked it, but we've renamed Zone 2 to hacking. You just hack away like this, for hours and hours, because everyone calls it Zone 2 and we're a bit sick of it. It's boring. So we call it hacking away for 6 hours. Uh-huh. But it's professional. I mean, it's professional sport. It's called a professional sport. It should feel like you're working, not just out having a great day with your mates, which we've got to be honest with each other. A lot of the days end up being like that, which is wonderful, which is really nice. Uh-huh. But I don't think, I mean, you're not racing now, but I'm still there. I think it's hypocritical for me to complain about the fact that every day feels like an actual honest day's work now. I mean, you'll be shocked by this one. When I'm racing, I don't talk to a soul. Like, the race can explode in a flash. I am just that way. Even the radio, the team have to ask me twice to actually tell me I need to respond, because I won't even take my hand off the bars to touch the button. Like, it is so intense out there now, and everyone's closer, and any kicker can be an opportunity, any bit of breeze, any downhill, uphill, like at any moment in the race, it can just go. And I'd say that the sport, obviously then you've got the nutrition side of it and all that, but just the sport in general is just it's so much more professional now. Like it is every day is intense, and I think that's great. I think that's how it should be, and I think we're seeing that in the quality of the racing. These real superstars, the way they're emerging, and I think it's a really exciting sport to follow now. We don't get these breakaways now. I mean, the green jersey battle at the Tour is incredibly exciting. The yellow jersey, there's no free kicks anymore. Even if the break survives, it's like, will it make it? Will it not? I think it's a really exciting time in the sport. And although it's a lot harder, I guess for me, it feels more comfortable. I actually prefer it like this. Yeah.
I remember waiting for the breakaway to go, and then, okay, Ted, go get on the front. It's your turn to take a pull for the next 4 hours. Or once the breakaway had gone, I mean, it was just so severely boring. It's like you wanted the action to happen, whereas that previous era of like waiting for the script to be written was tedious. So yeah, I can see how that could certainly keep you on your toes and keep the racing more interesting. I want to say that there's an emphasis on youth in cycling, and maybe I'm looking at too few examples, but like I'm looking at a Remco, right? Or what UAE is doing to sign these riders straight out of juniors, which it's like, you don't need to pay your dues anymore in the World Tour in order to become a established pro. I feel like in a similar way I have a very outside perspective to triathlon, but it feels like the sport is also emphasizing youth. So, I mean, like you can't deny the year that you were born as the old guy out there. Like, how do you feel going up against people who are literally half your age? Does it make you chuckle? Or are you like, I got to double down on training? Or do you relax saying, I have a lifetime of training, so I'm already ahead of you?
Yeah, I guess you get to this point. I mean, the fact that I came back, you're kind of going to do it, aren't you, until you're not competitive anymore. You don't feel like you can improve. And as you've said, the evolution of the sport is such, there's so many areas to improve now. I mean, that's almost the annoying thing every year. It's like, fuck, I can get better. Oh, God, okay. I'll keep going then. I mean, I'm really at no different point because it's so different. So all these new things like the training methodology, as you say, this hacking away, the way we train hard every day, you just get fitter, the VO2 type efforts that we do, the nutrition training with a lot more sugar, all of a sudden being able to do higher quality of work every session, or, especially your quality sessions. They give me a boost too, because you sort of weren't doing that. So I always say they don't ask for your birth. I mean, I remember someone telling me before I went to the Olympics, and I was the youngest on the team, and everyone was saying, you're young, and there'll be other Olympics, don't put too much pressure. And someone said to me, they don't ask for your birth certificate on the start line, make the most of your opportunity. And I kind of now am in reverse. I mean, I just, it's like, well, yeah, no one's asking for our birth certificate. We're all just racing here. So people talk about the respect and people not moving and this and that for everyone else. To be honest, I don't really notice that so much at all. I mean, I think that the difference now, Ted, is that before, as you know, there was a few really good guys in the world, and then there was sort of the rest. I mean, now almost everyone's good, and that's what creates that intensity in the race. It's like, the level of everyone in the World Tour is incredibly high, and that's what creates just like it's so hard. You go over a climb, you think, gosh, we're going hard, and there's literally the entire, like the convoys behind you. Whereas you're like, oh God, we better not go back for bottles now. We're gonna have to wait for the cars to come. No, the cars are right there. There's still 180 guys here. In the past, there might have been 30. Like a huge difference. And I guess that's come about through things like Strava. I'm not sponsored by them, by the way, but I'm just thinking of public knowledge of information. Guys can train and get to that level or as relatively as they possibly can by knowing what they need to do and doing that, and then they're very confident in their numbers. They know if they eat this, they can do that. I mean, obviously science isn't always going to work, but it definitely works for 90% of the time. There's no doubt about that, and so that's been a huge change in the sport. And as far as the age part goes, I don't even really notice it. They're just a bunch of other bodies out there. So, and I wouldn't even say it motivates me to beat them. I say I love being around them because they've got that intensity every day that you used to have when I was that age. I mean, I was rowing then, but every day was just freaking flat out. And so I love that, and I guess that's what keeps me going, keeps me getting better or believing that I'm getting better. And I think I show that. Till the wheels fall off, as they say. Whereas I say,
from the fountain of youth, man, it's amazing.
I mean, time stopped. That's for sure.
Yeah. So. It's interesting what you say about, you go over a knoll or, you know, a small climb. And in a previous generation, maybe there'd be half the peloton, but right now it's still the same 180 dudes going over that climb. But then from the perspective that I have observing the race, it's almost as though whether it was 2013 or 2024, the way that race unfolds is very similar. You're going to start with 180, and then at some point you're going to have half that, and at another point you're going to have half that and half that and half that. And so in 2004, it was Peter Sagan winning the race, and in 2024, it was Tadej Pogačar winning the race. So it's like, it's funny how you have the breakdown of who are the exemplary people and what they're able to do. It's like you're either, I mean, I would often talk about the 1% of the 1%. Like, are you the 1% that got you to the World Tour? Are you 1% of the 1% that allows you to be a team captain? Or are you the 1% of the 1% of the 1% that allows you to be a race winner consistently? So
you're so right. I mean, Peter was as dominant as Tadej is now, or Matthew, or any of those guys. I mean, there's really no difference. But like you say, and we know firsthand with Peter, because the amount of times we've been there with him when he's won, how that evolved. I guess the big difference now, as you'll see, is I say that the level, but the race can blow up much earlier. You know, I mean, normally we would look at, as you know, a profile, and it had to be a pretty severe profile to be like, oh, this is going to be you know, like a rolling day was, it's just rolling, 2,000 meters. There's no big climbs.
Sure.
I mean, now if there's any bump on a climb on a stage, you're analysing it. You're like, okay, what can they do here? There is none of this like, it'll be a simple, straightforward, flat sprint stage here today.
Yeah.
There is just none of that. Like every day, you know, that intensity of everyone just wanting to be at the front, everyone wanting to try to do something. It just keeps the pressure on it, and that's just extra fatigue in the body that, you know, for 2 or 3 hours we never used to experience because we're just twaddling along in the bunch, you know.
Yeah.
You and I might be on the front, everyone else is twaddling along in the bunch before they decide to race the last, you know, what was it? We'll get to the feed zone, then have a think about it, you know, we'll refuel and whatever.
Right.
Mate, I can't tell you the last time I took a feedback. I mean, you don't even plan to grab that. I mean, you have no idea what situation the race is going to be in when you go through that zone. And often teams don't even put their feeds there because they might put them strategically somewhere else so they can attack during that part. You know, I mean, honestly, teams look at any possibility to exploit anything. I mean, going back to the car now, man, that's one of the biggest efforts. I mean, in Tour of Poland, this past year, I did 520 watts for 5 minutes going back to the car to bring bottles back, you know, during a race. I mean, it was like the highest 5-minute power I had all year.
Yeah.
And it was just going to get bottles for the guys. I mean, the group was splitting on the climb. Like, I had to really fight to get back. But still, like, because you just don't want to have to do it. You know, you have people on the side of the road all the time. You go back as an absolute last resort because you know you got to be real strong to get back to the car sometimes to even get the bottles out. There's a lot of guys that get bottles now. This is talked about at the end of every stage. They just never get back to the bunch. I mean, you just feel for those guys.
Kiss the race goodbye.
They're just drifting out the arse, but at least they've got a drink. You know, at least they've got plenty of fuel to get them home.
Yeah. Oh, brutal.
Yeah.
So we have gravel beef in the gravel world when you want to incite something interesting. And I'm not saying this for you to incite triathlon beef, but extrapolate on something here for me. I'm going to probably butcher his name. Christian Blumenfeld.
Yeah.
Norwegian triathlete who is just a specimen, right? He's world champ, Ironman champ, so on and so forth. He made some really good headlines in the cycling world where he says he wants to go on, I think beginning in like 2026 and win the Tour de France. And for people who've seen this fella, and maybe they're just clickbait headlines, he looks like he's built like a Mack truck. He's not a diminutive fella, but he and his coach have said very convincingly that they're going to win the Tour de France.
Mack truck is more fit and healthy looking than him.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So can you expound upon this? Like, does he stand any chance to win the Tour de France in his lifetime?
Well, no, because he's already scrapped those plans.
Right. That was the follow-up headline was like, no, he's going to go back and try to do well in the Olympics.
Yeah. So I think what kind of happened there, he'd been talking about it for a while, to be honest, and he's been talking to me about it ever since I've been back in the World Tour. So at least the last, 4 or 5 years. And but the reality is he's not that strong on the bike. I mean, he's not even one of the strong guys on the bike in triathlon. So to think that he could come into and it became a financial thing. I mean, some teams said, "Yeah, we'll give you a bit of money and you can see how you go." But I think luckily he's got a coach who's very smart and who's actually now working with Uno X, and they actually have a really good look at it when they realised teams weren't sort of clambering over giving him this opportunity. And he thought, well, yeah, I'm better off doing what I'm good at and, making the money that I'm making here than taking a gamble in cycling. So, yeah, that fell apart pretty quickly. And, I mean, he had this crazy VO2 numbers and all this sort of stuff. But the reality is he's never, ever shown any time in a triathlon that he's actually that strong on the bike. So, begs the question of how accurate their machine is that they use because none of them seem to be, they seem to have struggled a bit, more recently. So,
well, perfect. Yeah, I wouldn't call that triathlon beef. It sounds like you're explaining facts pretty straightforwardly.
Yeah. He and I think, I don't know if he certainly didn't realize. I mean, it was a funny one with Michael Volgren, actually. And we're in Poland, and he said to me, "Yeah, I'm thinking I'll do another couple of years, and I'd really like to do triathlon." He said, "I'm thinking I might do the Olympics." I said, "Okay, can you swim, mate? Like they're real fast at swimming." No. But I'll learn. I was like, "Oh, okay." And I said, and I'm pretty gullible here, obviously, because mate, honestly, I think I know you can run because we run in Monaco when I've been down there training. You can ride, you're strong as hell. I think you'd be better off doing an Ironman. Like honestly, I think you could probably no. I want to go to the Olympics. And it's like, and then he started laughing because he was making fun of Blumenfeld talking about winning the Tour. So that kind of made me realise that I think Christian's not that dumb, that he realised he'd overstepped the mark with his comments and it wasn't received very well. And had he have found his way into cycling still, then the sport probably would have done everything possible to stop him from trying to achieve his goals, because it wasn't well received the way he made those comments and sort of belittled the work that the athletes have done to get to that level in their sport. So
100%.
Yeah, I think Christian saw the light and just backed out of that one. I don't know if it was graciously or not, but he's backed out of it. He's gone very quiet ever since. He didn't have a career after that, so yeah.
That was wise. Yeah, if anybody has no idea what we're talking about, look up Christian Blumenfeld. Google that as frenetically as possible, and then Google Tour de France as well, exactly. And you'll see both the headline and then his retraction from saying, you know what, maybe I'll put my achieving Tour de France victory on a back burner.
I thought the best was his coach, that I think he went to say by 27, we definitely want to be winning jerseys.
Yeah, winning jerseys.
Winning jerseys. So he's gone from winning the Tour back to the old, what was it, Richard Virenque or whoever.
Yeah.
Who was like winning multiple jerseys at the Tour. Blumenfeld wasn't just going to win the Tour; he was going to win jerseys. He was going to win multiple. So
amazing.
Yeah, I think it was probably a clickbait thing that just didn't quite go the right way for them.
Yeah. Well, it is getting late there. It's mid-afternoon here. I'm going to be taking off here shortly to pick up my children from school. So we're going to wrap up quickly with 3 questions, which I'm going to be very interested to hear your response, because you've certainly traveled the world and met a lot of people. So 3 questions. 1, favorite place to ride a bike? What is one place that you would like to ride that you have never ridden? And with whom would you love to share a bike ride, a conversation, share that time hammering away? What was the term you used? Hacking away, yeah. So, I mean, it's a tragedy at the moment where you can see this picture in the background, of LA, but what's going on there? And I think both of us would say that that's our, as far as best place in the world to ride a bike. And
I think it's, we know the roads around there so well, which makes it. But I mean, I think anyone that spends just a couple of days there will agree. I mean, just the wow factor of being so close to that, city, and it's obviously just really hard to see what's going on. I mean, Geraint and I obviously train there a lot each winter. This is one of the first ones we're not there for the last 6 years, since 2018.
Oh.
He's in Australia down under, and I'm here in Andorra swimming. But but I mean, he said, gosh, it's, it hits home a bit harder when you know the place, some people there. And I said, well, I don't honestly think until we go there, you won't really understand it. I mean, it's so astronomical what's happened there. It's, it's just really tragic. But without a doubt, that's my favourite place best place to ride a bike. Now, where would I like to ride?
Yeah, you've ridden all over the world. So where do you
I can't say anywhere. I mean, I've ridden everywhere I want to ride. I can't think of anywhere that I haven't ridden. That's a real tough one. I feel like I've been fortunate enough to, and that's why I go back to LA, because I think it's one of the best places in the world to ride. I literally could go anywhere I want, I think, without sounding like a dick, to ride my bike. And I'd have to just say this is all about that amazing place. And, anyone that's listening, if you haven't ridden there, and after the, dust has settled on this terrible event there, I encourage you all to get out there and, support the cycling community there, and appreciate it for yourselves. Now, on the last one, the bike ride with someone, once again, I feel like I've ridden with everyone. But one thing I've always wanted to do, and it's not a bike ride, but I guess I could go for a ride with him, but I've always wanted to play golf with Tom Brady, because we've got the same birthday, 3rd of August. Yeah. Maybe that's why I can go until I'm 45, because he did it. So, if I could choose to do any sort of, if we could change it to a sporting activity, it'd be go and play golf with Tom Brady for our birthday. That'd be cool.
Follow up to that. You have been very involved with Best Buddies over the years. I've done one or two over the years. And I mean, Tom Brady was very involved in the hiatus one. Did you ever do one with Brady?
Yeah. I did a couple when he was there with the football game, and then he's been down in Miami the last couple of years. So I met him a couple of times, and I was actually, a friend of ours took us out to have a golf lesson with this instructor in Miami for our son. He's 4, he's obsessed with golf, and we were going out there. He said, he messaged to say he was just a bit held up with a couple of people, but to come in and just hang out until he's finished. We rock up, and it was Bryson DeChambeau and Tom Brady having a golf lesson with this guy. So, my son was, watching these guys practice, and then he jumped in and had his turn. And Tom's always very polite. I mean, he's well-spoken guy, but he's always on his way to something. DeChambeau was hung out for a bit, and really wanted to engage, and it was really lovely. But been exposed to him a bit over the years, so we'll get our game of golf at some point. It's
Perfect.
Getting the schedules to align.
Yeah. Well, as a New Englander, we love our Tom Brady. That's a great way to cap the show. Thank you very much. Thank you for scheduling this, for allowing it, for sharing your story, because it's certainly one of a kind. I appreciate it.
Thanks for keeping in touch, and we'll catch up in person at some point soon. And thanks for this. I mean, it's been interesting to think back through it all, and gives you a bit more clarity of where you are now, and also reminds you to make the most of every opportunity you have, because you can't do this forever.
Beautiful. Thank you.